I like to think this as I took you to a fusion restaurant, right? It's traditional, but there's something about it that feels a little bit new because I've introduced a new ingredient into it, which is live action.
Something incredible that we need to talk about is that, which goes way beyond anything that you see in TV, are the fight sequences in this. And my understanding is that you actually shot a lot of these fight sequences beforehand, which I don't think has happened in TV animation. I've never heard of that happening. Maybe it has, I don't know. But can you talk a little bit about that process? Because it's very unique how you created these amazing action sequences.
So it's not unique in live action. Back in the day when I worked at Marvel, that's exactly what we did. Any of these stunt-heavy sequences are stunt-vised. So the stunt choreographer takes the camera, talk to the director, and we give just some direction. And he or she would then work out the choreography and shoot it out almost verbatim of how we would cut it to help with the rhythm of it all. So me having martial arts experience and the whole idea of being authentic, the last thing I wanted was a sequence with a fight and, how the sword was held or how the placement of the feet was wrong or was kind of guessed. I didn't want that. Also, it takes forever to board one of those sequences, and I didn't want to kill board artists. So the best thing to do was to hire a stunt team. And this is the Game of Thrones things where everybody has their expertise, and we weren't going to make somebody do what they don't do naturally, right? I know martial arts. I could have boarded it, but there's only one me, so I would have died too, and I don't want to die. So this came out of necessity of how this production needed to be made. So we took, I hired Sunny Sun, who's just, oh my God, he's just done so much in the stunt field. He's also a friend of mine. I hired him, and again, our production took place in the height of pandemic, and at that time, China was a little bit more had the COVID thing down, and we were still under lockdown. So he went to China, hired his team, and they bubbled, and we got a studio space up, and they shot everything with like 2 or 3 months or something like that. And we took that and we just interjected that with the animatic, because now that becomes, and this goes back to traditional animation, that's just rotoscoping and what Disney used to do a long time ago, and the animators know exactly what it is, because if I draw it, they're going to make me do it, and I can't.
So there's no storyboards for the fight sequences? It's just the footage cut in?
Yep.
Wow. So you did all the framing and all the staging in camera?
Yep.
Wow. And then that went to the CG animators.
In between that, what we would do is we would take that sequence and we would have the previs department put it in the space and in the set that production design did, so that we made sure it was going to work in camera. And generally it did, because we sat with Sonny and we said, here's the location. We flew him around and we said, when you're going to hit this pillar, this is the pillar you're hitting. And we have measurements and all that stuff. So, and that's very typical of live action VFX space, and that's a space I'm very comfortable in, because those are always the movies I end up getting on, which are very big, heavy effects, projects. It's a lot of just threading live action and animation together, and I'm not very sacred about animatics. Animatics is just a visual contract for what the overseas studios need.
So Toby, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the production design choices that you made, the use of negative space. We've talked a lot about how this is, a lot like live action, but also there's a ton of art in this. There's a ton of, design choices that are specific to not just, this is a CG project, but it looks like a 2D feature in many ways, just because there's so much attention paid to negative space and to textural choices. What were you looking at when you were designing this? Were you looking just at Japanese art, or what were your inspirations?
100% Japanese art. The whole idea is that, this show is a period piece. So, of course, where do you go to for inspiration? You should go to the cultural source. So that was one thing that in my initial interviews and early discussions with Jane, we kind of just had a Vulcan mind meld. Because she's a Trekkie, by the way, you guys.
Ah, you just outed me.
So we had the Vulcan mind meld. We totally figured it out. So there was no arguing or anything like that. It was just, we knew what we needed to do. So she pointed me towards a specific artist that, hey, this is somebody that I've been looking at. His name is Yoshida Hiroshi. So Yoshida-san is classically trained in ukiyo-e, but also trained in European oil painting. Traveled the world, had been exposed to different cultures and different art. And his art form, his ukiyo-e prints are a hybrid. If you look at those compositions, they follow a more kind of what we see today as like a Hollywood style composition. They don't have the forced stylized perspectives, but he utilizes all the principles of ukiyo-e, the negative space, the notan, concentrating the contrast. That's what we built off of. We are creating shapes and designing those shapes using value, the notan principles of light and dark, clustering those high contrast areas where we want you looking, for the focal point. And then within those shapes, we are controlling the textures that are within them, so that, these tree shapes, we only use these specific textures for the tree shapes. And for wood, we only use these textures for wood. So you don't use the same brush that you would to paint the stones that you would the wood. And that way you're making these stylistic choices, but it's all based off of Japanese ukiyo-e.
And how much of this was done? Was there like handwork involved? Is it all created in CG, the textures, or were you actually painting over it? How were you handling that?
Great question. It's both. So like I mentioned, we're 2.5D. So 90% of the backgrounds in our show are 2D painted, but they are projected onto geometry at times. So we'll use what's called camera mapping, which if you think back to the old multiplane cameras, to quote old Disney stuff, it works a lot like that, where you have layers of depth, flat layers painted, oriented towards camera. Then we do projection mapping. So if you need to see parallax, if you need a camera to raise up over a surface and see the front of the surface as well as the top, then we're projecting a painting on this surface and projecting a painting on that surface. So projection mapping. So that's all 2D. But then we also have scenes like a lot of the stunt viz where the camera's moving and whipping all around the characters and moving around. And so we needed to do full 3D builds because that would be insane to project a painting here and project there and there and there and there. You'd be doing like 30 projections for one shot sometimes. So we did full 3D build some, but what we did is we had our background painters work on the textures, and we worked a lot in look dev to try to get those 3D sets to look as close to the 2D as possible. So to answer your question, we did both. And hopefully you can't tell. The goal there is we were hopefully trying to make it so you couldn't tell which scenes were full 3D and which were 2.5D.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship with the creators and how you merged your visions, or were they coming in with ideas visually of how the show should look, or was that entirely up to you and they just passed along like, here's these great scripts?
Because they haven't been in the animation space before, and they were very generous with not knowing and really saying that they didn't know. So we did talk in the very early stages of what philosophically it should be. And then through talking and then hiring teams, we slowly put together the looks and everything. And of course, the showrunners had their input. But I think one of the success to this show is that we all had the same vision, and nobody diverted. We all had the same vision, and we all were in lock and step with each other every step of the way. And on top of it all, Netflix, I don't say this very often, but my gosh, I'm working at a studio where I go, I want stunt fizz. Okay. That was it. I want to do this. Okay. And it's just to have that much support to doing something that's never been done before. It was an amazing feeling. And same thing with the showrunners. I said, I think I want to do this. I want to run the pipeline like this because this is not how animation does it, but I want to do it like this. Okay. That's an incredible feeling, you guys.
They were like that with the look too.
Yeah.
They pretty much, we were pitching what things should look like, and hopefully we were just hitting home runs and they loved it. But yeah, we never really got any pushback.
I know in that terms, it's a very boring story.
There's no struggle.
Well, the struggle was
what was the struggle?
The struggle was budget and schedule. I mean, it's still a TV schedule, and basically what we're trying to do is, and again, let me step back a few years to when I first got this script, and I said, I want to do what Game of Thrones did for television. I want to do what Blue Eye Samurai is going to do for TV animation. And I got to call out to my buddy Ted here, who worked on Game of Thrones with me, or I worked on it with him. He was our VFX, one of our VFX supervisors, and I learned a lot from working on that show. Just how they did their pipeline and what kind of people worked on it and the vision and how you put a team together. Everybody was such a Navy SEAL, and that's how you get the quality out on that show, right? So I basically took that pipeline and jammed it into our pipeline. And that's what I told the showrunners I want to do. I wanted to just up that level of TV series animation. Right. And I wanted to see if we could, which is hard because we're trying to jam it into a TV schedule. And same thing like, Game of Thrones, they're trying to do feature level, but they're jamming it in a TV schedule. And it was hard. It's always hard.
Well, we can't reveal anything about what's going to happen in the second season, but maybe more generally for people who are interested, can you talk a little bit about what you're hoping to accomplish on the second season?
Anytime the creators on any show, we watch our own material, we're like, oh, all we can see are the things like, oh, I wish we could have done that. I wish we could have done this. I visually want to explore and push it more because we did push for that ukiyo-e and the stylization, but at some point we had to say, okay, that's as far as we can take it for now because now we have to focus on making this thing. So I would love to see if we can explore and push it even further this time around and to get that look to feel even more stylized personally. Also, just, it's no secret. We kind of end season 1 that she's leaving Japan. So really looking forward to that and exploring all those visual possibilities.
And I want to push the camera. I want to get the camera to feel more organic.
If we can give a huge round of applause to Jane and Toby for the amazing work that they've done.
Hey, thanks for having us. Thanks for watching the show, guys.
Thank you.